in my league. Got a blockbuster on the way and a pickup up my sleeve. They call my team insane, say I'm the one to beat. So you better bring your A game and start playing.
Welcome to another episode of the Great Fantasy Baseball Invitational Podcast. I am Justin Mason, lead fantasy writer and analyst of friendsoffantasybenefits.com. Joining me on this episode is Jake Halusker from RotoSaurus and the High Stakes Heat Fantasy Baseball Podcast. This was a fun episode to do. Jake and I have gotten to know each other fairly well over the last year because we're in a league which we have a group chat, which I highly recommend people do. I don't know why if you're in a league with a bunch of people, especially if you're kind of getting to know them, that you don't do some sort of group chat. It's really given me the opportunity to get to know some great guys in this industry. They're in this league put together by Zach Waxman. And Jake and I talk about kind of how he got into fantasy baseball and kind of his growth, because he won an overall championship in 2019, which is super, super impressive. He's a very, very good player. So I hope you enjoy my interview with Jake Halusker from RotoSaurus.com.
Fun times in Cleveland again. Still Cleveland. Come on down to Cleveland town, everyone. Under construction since 1868. See our river that catches on fire. It's so polluted that all our fish have AIDS. We see the sun almost 3 times a year. This guy has at least 2 DUIs. The flats look like a Scooby-Doo ghost town. Don't slow down in East Cleveland or you'll die. Our economy's based on LeBron James. Buy a house for the price of a VCR. Our main export is crippling depression. We're so retarded that we think this is art. It could be worse though, at least we're not Detroit! We're not Detroit!
Joining me now is Jake Halusker of RotoSaurus and the High Stakes Heat Podcast. Jake, how you doing, my friend?
I'm great. It's great to be with you, man.
It's always great to have you on whatever podcast I can get you on, and because it gives me an excuse to play that. I wasn't even gonna play it for this podcast, and you're like, you could do the regular intro. I'm like, well, now I have to, right?
I'll listen to it every day. That's fine.
You should wake up. That should be your alarm clock.
they came out well over a decade ago, and they're still as funny as they always were.
They're hilarious. I beg people to go on YouTube, find them, and listen to them. I like the second one. That's the one I play on the podcast because I think it's the most funny out of all of them. But there's some really, really good ones on there. Jake, we're going to talk about your TGFBI team. Let's start with that. When I mentioned we were going to talk about your TGFBI team, you're like, do we have to? Is it going poorly right now for you?
No, it's just middle of the pack. Like a lot of my teams this year, it's been a pretty boring year for me. I have some good hits, I have some big misses, and a lot of things are just kind of settling in the middle. It's been really just, I don't know. It's not interesting. Most of it, which it makes for great podcast fodder. But.
Yeah. Why is what is the common theme along your teams? Because you do a fair amount of teams, right? Not
as many as you, but
not as many as me, but a normal amount, right? If they're all
usually
okay, so that's more than a normal amount, right? So if they're all kind of middling, is there a common theme or thread to why? Did you make a mistake in evaluating players? Have you been hit hard by injuries? Was there a mistake in the process? Why is everything kind of middle of the pack for you?
Well, it's not really injuries because I think everybody's kind of dealing with that. I don't have anything egregious. Suspensions, those are hurting me. I'm kind of weak in power in a lot of places, which is surprising to me. I feel like that seems to be the common theme. I have a couple teams that are bad in saves, but power has been kind of my big weakness. I guess I don't have any of the big, I don't have the Otanis. I don't have the Vlad Guerreros because I was not up with drafting them this year. So that is hurting me. Starting pitching has been going really well aside from suspension and injury. I think overall evaluation of pitching was pretty spot on for the most part, except for a couple Aaron Nola shares that have been kind of blah. But with this TGFBI team, it's I don't know. It's kind of a combination of all that, but power is definitely a thing because I have some power, but I drafted guys for average more than power this year just because I thought average was going to be a problem, and average was a problem, and it's still a problem for my teams despite thinking I was drafting for it.
Do you think that the change in the balls had an effect for your the way you drafted, and are you going to change that kind of approach in the future?
I didn't really take that into account too much. It was so close to the season, and I think our evaluation was not going to be affected too much by it. So we just kind of said we're just going to go with what we have. I didn't change it too heck of a lot. I drafted guys like Devers, and in this team, I drafted guys like Devers, and he's really the only guy that I drafted that I think had 35 homer upside. Which when you're drafting for average and you're trying to get guys that are all hitting 20 to 25, and a few of them don't, then you're probably not going to be high in power if there's other guys going off.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the hard part is. Drafting for average, if the average doesn't come through, you're kind of screwed, right? Because you draft for average, your average is 240 right now, which is league average, so below average for fantasy. And then you don't have the power to kind of at least I got this to go. So how do you turn that around rest of the season? Is it turn aroundable?
If you decide you're going to punt, I mean, in terms of winning TGFBI, that's not really going to happen. But if you're going to go for winning your league, the average is, as you said, it's 240. What is it?
Yeah, it was around 240 before my vacation.
It is. It's 239. Yeah, so I'm dead last in average in this league. So it's probably a decision I'm going to have to make to just punt and start going with sloppy guys. And I guess I have to make that change. I don't know if I've analyzed these standings too heavily to see that I had that glaring of a weakness in average. I thought it was kind of like all my other teams, but it's even worse than my other teams. So thanks for pointing that out to me, Justin.
You're welcome.
To make that change.
This is what I'm here for, right?
Hey, this is punting time. If you gotta do it, you gotta do it.
I talked about this recently on the Sleeper on the Bus podcast. I made a decision to punt stolen bases in one of my mains. I was in last place by 5 stolen bases. My only stolen base guy was Miles Straw. And I was like, you know what? I might as well just try to win the other categories and push myself into second or third, screw the overall. That Phil DeSoto in my league's probably going to win anyways. And just try to at least get my money back or make a little bit of profit here. And I think it was a good decision so far.
Yep.
So we'll see if it ends up paying off in the long run. But at some point in these overall contests, you have to make a kind of decision whether you're in it for the overall or not.
Yeah, man, you got to keep your ROI up. And we actually we conversed a little about this on your FWFB pod. And that was when I was debating whether or not I was going to punt saves on my main. And I ended up doing it. I was dead last in saves in the overall. So there was really no point to continuing with that. And it's been a good decision so far. Carrying 14 starters on my roster has been hard because they keep getting injured too. So I'm still down to only 11 I can use, and 2 of them I don't want to use right now.
Yeah, one of the only times I checked in, on our little group chat we have for a different league, during my vacation last week, I saw your message about Pablo Lopez going down. I was like, well, that just screwed up my vacation a little bit, so I'm no longer going to go look at this.
Yeah, we were trying to enjoy being at a party, and Dave McDonald, my podcast partner, he says, Jake, don't look at your phone for a while. And I said, oh no, who is it? And he said, well, it's the guy you're most invested in. And I said, oh shit, this is going to be a fun weekend.
Yeah, so I'm hoping. I haven't even seen any of the news as I've gotten back on if there's an update on how long he's looking to be out for or anything like that. So
no. I didn't drop him, but if it's 6 weeks plus, then obviously it's a drop. So it's rotator cuff, so you never think it's going to be anything good. Yeah, no, that doesn't sound good at all.
Let's talk about a little bit about you. Well, actually, before we do, you mentioned your partner Dave. I gotta ask you. Dave is 20th in the TGFBI overall. Mm-hmm. Does it bother you when he's beating you in a league or in an overall?
In a league, yeah. Sure, because we've always competed against each other, and he will tell you that he's beaten me more than I've beaten him. So yeah, it does bother me a little bit. I mean, he was the guy that got me into this ultimately when it was about 20 years ago now. So yeah, I want to beat Dave. We're longtime best friends and we're competitive with each other. No, I mean I want to see him succeed though, because obviously it's good for the brand. So I'm never going to begrudge him finishing well in an overall competition. That's for sure. So it really only bothers me when we're in the same league and he beats me.
Would it bother you if he won an overall competition, considering you've won one and he hasn't?
No, I mean. It would give him more reason to think that he's better than me. If he
which wouldn't be good for anybody.
But again, good for the brand. I'm okay with it.
Okay, we'll talk about a little bit about the brand here in a minute, but let's start with you just in general. When did you start following baseball? You're from the Cleveland area, I assume, because you live there now. Was it just like in your blood being from Cleveland? You were going to be a Cleveland baseball team fan and love baseball?
Yeah, I was always a Cleveland fan in general, all sports. And I don't know what really got me interested in sports. I think it was maybe seeing my dad read the sports page. And it was something that, I don't know, I could kind of share with him. I mean, I loved just opening the newspaper, the Cleveland Plain Dealer, and going through the sports page and looking at all the box scores. And baseball spoke to me the most just because of how many statistics there were that I could take in and rank players based on in my mind. And I just always loved diving into the box scores. Even before fantasy, when I was 7, 8, I would just pour over those for a good half hour every night after school. I got into reading Sports Illustrated and stuff like that before there was the internet. And I've always just been a general sports fan. But we are really diehard Cleveland guys because we were all born here. We all came back here after school, and my whole family's here, and it just was natural for us.
Then when did you start playing fantasy? You said you started playing like 20 years ago, which is right around the same time I started playing. I think we're about the same age, right? You're mid-30s?
I'm 36, yeah.
Yeah, I'm 36 too. So we started playing about the exact same time. How did you get into playing fantasy? You said, did Dave brought you into it, or?
Yeah, Dave did. We became friends in high school when we were sophomores. And I can't remember if it was our junior or our senior year. I think it was senior year, so that would have been 2001, the 2001 season. Dave introduced us to me and Tony DiVincenzo, who kind of he's on our pod sometimes, and he's part of our group of friends that drafts together and analyzes together. He got us into what was called budget baseball. It was a CDM sports offering. And it was a salary cap game, but it was just a base flat entry fee. It was like $100, and you got a season. You put together a roster of players under a salary cap, and you got like 10 ads for the whole year. And it wasn't one of those leagues where you paid per transaction, because we were in high school and we didn't have the money for that. So he got us started doing that. It was points. It was fun. I was not particularly good at that version. I don't remember how long I played it. It went away probably when I was in college, so it was probably only like 4 or 5 years. But it was my appetite whetter for it, and I got into pretty much any fantasy sport that I could for a couple of years. I was playing, when ESPN had all kinds of random fantasy offerings like bass fishing and bowling and all that other shit. I was doing that because I was a degenerate and I was a freshman in college with nothing better going on. So I played all that stuff and played on sandbox.com. Did you ever play on that one?
No, but every time I'm talking to somebody about like the history of fantasy and stuff like that, they bring up Sandbox. I totally missed this. I guess it was a site of some sort.
It was a site, and I think Fanball kind of absorbed it after a while.
Okay.
The original iteration of Fanball, and then it went away. But that was kind of my first foray into redraft. Like outside of that salary cap game, was doing stuff on Sandbox. But they had everything too. I remember playing Fantasy XFL the one year that the XFL was around. Even I had like He Hate Me on my team and stuff like that. So yeah, I just loved it. I loved it got me more into pretty much any sport that I could get into, and I had an appetite for it. And
yeah,
then,
I played some weird fantasy games too at some point. Like I know I played a few seasons of fantasy hockey.
Mhm.
I'm trying to remember I don't think I did fantasy bass fishing. I don't even know how that would work.
It was ESPN did it when there was just a massive craze for free stupid fantasy games, and it was, I don't know, I think it was you picked like 6 different anglers or something like that, and you just saw how they finished in the competition. I mean, it didn't last very long for me because there wasn't too much I could get into that, but it's just an example of something stupid that I did.
Right. So when do you start moving towards high stakes and like you mentioned CDM. CDM is another game I didn't play. Didn't know. I mean, I probably would have loved it, because I got into fantasy sophomore year of high school and really like grasped onto the baseball league I was in, and then a bunch of football leagues. I didn't I played a little basketball, played a little hockey, played some other weird sports here and there, but like. I wish I'd, just branched more out into the baseball sphere and learn stuff. So I've heard a lot of guys, Vlad Sedler and Scott Jenstead, talk about like playing CDM first, and that was their transition over to NFBC. Was that the same for you?
Yeah, pretty much. CDM was the first time that I really started putting money into fantasy, and that wasn't, I would do that one budget baseball league every year, but that was it. I would do one team in that, and that was it because it was $100 and I had no money. As I got older and as I went to towards the end of college, I believe is when they started doing draft and plays. They call them draft and plays. They were just basically redraft satellite leagues, that kind of thing, for various different entry fees. And that was my first foray into doing redraft for money. That was probably mid 2000s. So I did that for a little while. I didn't really have the time to fully research fantasy per se. I was still pretty ingrained in following all sports, especially Cleveland sports, and I didn't put as much research into fantasy back then. It was just kind of for fun. And then Dave started playing high stakes. He joined the NFBC. I think it was 2006. It was either 2006 or 7. And he went to Chicago, drafted this team, told us about it. And then he took us the next year when we went to Chicago. Or when he went to Chicago, we were there. I had friends in Chicago, so I was kind of hanging out with them while he drafted his team, but he kind of took us along for the ride. Our friend Tony went and drafted the team with him. And then Tony saw how, fun the live drafting was. It wasn't something I was aware of, this whole live drafting atmosphere. And a couple more years, I kind of watched Dave playing it. I wasn't ready to invest the money yet because I didn't really have a good job. When I left school, I volunteered in various places for a couple years, a couple organizations, and then I had to move back in with my parents because I had no money because I volunteered for 2 years after college. So once I finally got some disposable income and got my feet under me, that's kind of when I started thinking about doing NFBC. And then I did a couple $500 leagues. They were live in Vegas back when they had $500 12-team leagues in Vegas, and that was, I want to say 2011. Did a cashed second in one of those two, so I got my money back essentially, and I decided to go back again the next year. I did a live primetime event. They had a 12-team main for a couple years. That one went pretty well. I won that league, and I won my online championship league that year, so I was pretty hooked. I did a main after that in 2013. Came in third in that, and then did another one, and I just kept going on. So we went to Vegas after a couple years in Chicago. So when I finally started live drafting, we were in Vegas. So we've been going there every year. And I did not go there 2 years when my wife was pregnant with our 2 kids. So I missed a couple years, and ironically, those are like the 2 years that I've done the worst in the main, just because I didn't draft those live. I think I draft better live than online, frankly, especially in a league of that size.
That's interesting because I think a lot of people would say it's harder to draft live than it is online.
The competition is a little stiffer, yeah. Yeah,
and that I know that for me, I've had more success in leagues that I've drafted online as opposed to live. So it's kind of interesting to hear that you've had more success the opposite. So you're taking the success away from other people.
I'm not good at following drafts on computer screens. For whatever reason, I get distracted very easily. I tend to go down rabbit holes looking at different players while things are going on. I miss 3 picks. It helps to have, even if you're doing a live draft or an online draft, it helps to have somebody with you if you can. And now if we do anything significant, like when we were in the pandemic in 2020 and we were doing our sprint mains, we were all, kind of together helping each other out, entering in the draft tracker for the other one so that the person that was drafting can focus more on what's, looking at what's going on. And I think when I'm live, I just have a better grasp on what's going on at the time, because I'm really, especially with online auctions. Like online auctions, I'm a mess because I cannot watch what player is coming out when they're coming out so quickly. I need to be able to hear things and process them audially. I'm not good at drafting online. It's pretty true.
I will say that I think that an auction isn't really an auction online, and I don't like doing online auctions. I much prefer doing auctions in person because I feel like you learn a lot by hearing people bid and watching people bid, and I think that goes into kind of the game theory of the auction itself. You've been super successful in the auctions, right? You won an overall auction.
2019, yeah.
And I think you're the only person that I've brought on to this TGFBI podcast that has won an overall, at least in NFBC.
Really? Yeah. That was a really fun experience. I mean, it's easily the league that I've paid the most attention to, just because how could you not? But that I didn't have a lot of experience with live auctions, and I was listening to the experts do the labor auctions and tout auctions on Sirius for years, telling myself this is what you should be doing. Like this is right in your wheelhouse. I love bargaining. I love, and Dave jokes, I've always been a garage sailor. I've always been a haggler, and it's just something that's in my blood. It's in my nature. It's the most fun way to draft, especially live. And you're right. It's hearing the nuances, hearing the vocal ticks, hearing and seeing people, what they're doing when they're bidding. Are they looking at their sheets? Are they looking at you? Are they looking at the draft board? All that stuff. There are a lot of tells that are out there. It's very much like poker. I know it's cliche in the fantasy circle to compare things to poker, but there are a lot of similarities in that regard.
I completely agree. I think, like I said, I mean, you learn a lot about your competition in an auction, and what kind of players they're willing to go the extra buck on, but I do think, and I started with auctions. So my original Homer League was a 4x4 AL only original rules auction league, keeper league that I was in for 15 years when I first started. And so, like, for me, there was a huge adjustment period when I first started playing snake drafts. Like, I didn't understand how that even worked. Like, what do you mean I can't just load up with the guys I want? Like, I have to actually wait for you to come back around to me. But yeah, I love auctions. What was the feeling like as is coming down to the wire when you're winning your overall? Did you have a big lead in the last few weeks, or were things still in question?
It was still in question. It wasn't a big lead, and I was in second for probably about 3 months. Jason Anthony was winning the overall for that entire time. It was pretty much either going to be he or I that won it. Once it got to August, we knew those two teams were going to come down to it, and I think I overtook him right at the beginning of September. It was either the end of August, beginning of September, and it certainly was not, it was not a foregone conclusion I was going to pull it out. But the lead going into the last week, I was pretty confident that my team would really have to stumble for it to fall apart. And honestly, when I won it, when it finally was done, on Sunday, I was playing softball. I was on the softball diamond, and I'm looking at the box scores on MLB in between innings and things like that, or when I'm waiting to bat. And when the final game was done, it just kind of, I don't know, it just kind of sat there and go, I guess it's over. I don't think a stat correction is going to take this back. And I just kind of, I was walking out to the field, just put my arms in the air, and I went, I got it. And everybody was, obviously excited because they knew how much money it was, but it was fun to win it, while I was playing, not baseball, old people softball, but still it was an exciting thing. That's for sure. And it didn't hit me just the finality of it, I guess, didn't officially hit for a couple days, but it was really a rush to watch those overall standings every day for the last month.
So, like, you get a big check, right? Like the big, like, you know, publisher clearinghouse type check, and then you get, like, do you get like a plaque or something? I think I saw Rob DiPietro got a plaque, right? Do you like carry that everywhere you go when like it's like during fantasy draft season? Like, do you like take it with you to Vegas just to like march it around?
I just got the plaque because usually they ship them to the hotel. They ship them to the Bellagio when they have them made, so they can hand them out on stage. But since there were no live drafts last year, they didn't obviously do that. They didn't mail it to me because they want to give it to you in person. We went to Vegas this year, and Greg realized that the hotel had lost it from last year, so they had to get it remade. So I was on stage with the guys that had won overalls, and Casey Cha, who was inducted into the NFBC Hall of Fame. But they mailed me the plaque. I got it maybe a month after Vegas. They had to have it redone.
So, like, when you like go over to like Dave's house for dinner or something or beers, like, you don't just bring it with you, just to remind him like you've got one and he doesn't.
Well, every time he comes over to pot at my house, it's on the wall behind me. So
that's good. Because I promise you, if I ever win an overall, I will just bring it around with me wherever I go.
It was fun. I took pictures. You know, when you're an overall champion, usually you send in a picture of you with the check, you know, like Publishers Clearinghouse style. So I took it to a place that has a good view of the Cleveland industrial skyline, and I'm just, you know, walking with this check. And it was a tourist photo spot. You know, I mean, Cleveland tourism is not, you know, Hawaii tourism, but there were a few people taking pictures there, and I got some weird looks for it. But it was fun doing that. You know, my wheels were spinning for a while thinking about how I was going to do it. You know, I wanted to make it Cleveland centric and stuff like that. So it was fun to do that. My wife took the pictures. She enjoyed it. She did a good job. And I had it framed, and I put together Topps cards from everybody that was on the team that year. I obtained as many as I could from 2019, and I kind of arranged them around the check, and it's in a big frame. It's huge. It's extremely heavy. But it was something I wanted to have done just because I thought it was a cool way to remember all the players that got me there. It was neat.
That's really cool. And I mean, it's awesome feat to kind of accomplish. Like, do you feel like you have to like repeat just to like prove you're not a fluke like at some point, or like not to say you need to go back to back or anything like that, but like, you know, that's especially kind of early on in your fantasy career when you're only in your early 30s to like achieve that. Like, do you feel like you need to get another one?
I hear that. Yeah, I do feel like I kind of need to get another one because I don't have the track record of consistent success that other Hall of Famers have. So yeah, I feel like, you know, for me to really prove that it was not just a fluke, I do need to win something else. I don't think that's going to happen this year, but hopefully, you know, a lot of guys don't even win one, so I should be able to hang my hat on that. But if I do, then I feel like I'll get a little too complacent. So I do want to keep. I definitely want to get another one. I mean, the main would be obviously the one that I would be going for, but I wouldn't mind getting another auction one because I would like to kind of cement myself as somebody who knows auctions pretty well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be cool to win a snake draft overall and an auction overall. Like, really show like, hey, you give me the game and I'm gonna beat you at it.
That's true. I've cashed in a lot of mains, but I've never finished more than I think 40th in the overall for the mains. So that would be something that, yeah, I agree with that. You can say that you can win both formats.
I'm just looking to win a main event league. Like I'm not even caring about the overall yet. I want to get my first main event victory. Victory.
It's a legitimate accomplishment, man. I mean, those drafts are no joke, and you know, it's not like everybody that plays in the NFBC is an expert, but when people are putting down that kind of money, you know, they're at least doing the work. The majority of them. There are some that have money to burn and just kind of throw it away, but. A lot of people.
I'd like to know who they are so I can get in their league next year.
I had one of those. You've heard Scott Genstad talk about the Rogue Drafter with Jeff.
Yeah,
I was in Scott's league for that one, and it was that guy clearly had all kinds of money that he didn't know what to do with.
So let's set the scene on this one. So a guy shows up. Nobody's ever seen him before.
No idea.
He looks homeless, right?
He was very disheveled. He had like boat shorts on and loafers, and just seemed, even for Vegas, seemed out of place.
But it's a $1,700 league. He sits down with a magazine, right?
Essentially, yeah, that's all he had. Magazine. Didn't even have any lists or anything like that.
And he runs out of players to pick at some point, right? And he drafts like all Mariners and A's because there was the Japan series already.
Yeah, he took half of the AL West in the first 20 rounds. I think he drafted Aaron Judge in the first that year, which was kind of weird. But then he took Chris Davis in the second. What's his face? Hunter Strickland in the fourth round.
Because he had gotten 2 saves in that opening series.
And from then on out, it was a wild roller coaster for that one. But yeah, he timed out a number of times because he just didn't know who to pick. And he's back in the main this year. I haven't.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, I believe so. He was in one of Phil Dussault's leagues, I think. So.
Wow.
I should check.
You'll have to tell me his name after we finish recording, so I can look it up. Maybe he's in my league because I'm in a league with Phil, which is, like I said, he's kicking my ass.
Phil saw his name and he's like, "Is this the guy?" And we like, "Yeah, that's the guy. Wow, he's back."
That's amazing. There was a guy in one of my main events this year who did not draft enough healthy pitchers to start the season. And so I am wondering now if that's him.
He did the Sale Syndergaard and Severino combo.
But he also drafted a couple other guys where it's like, and I was doing the math on it, I was like, he only has 8 healthy pitchers. He's going to have to drop these guys before the start of the season. Like, I don't. He drafted Vaughn before he knew Vaughn was going to be in the majors. Drafted Kirilloff. Drafted Wander Franco. Like, it was like he drafted like 8 or 9 guys who weren't going to be, either because of injury or being in the minors, like start the year. So that was pretty funny to me.
Not a winning strategy right there.
No, everyone's like, well, this is a 14-team league now. I'm very happy with that. Let's talk about RotoSaurus. Why did you start wanting to write and podcast about fantasy?
Well, we started it. We kind of had the idea bouncing around, and at the end of 2011, we had some extra time. So Dave and I, it was just Dave and I, put this site together mainly because we wanted to provide something that people needed. And at that time, MLB depth charts was not around. So we decided to do depth charts, and we did them kind of for fantasy, and we did them a little bit different style from Jason. We we determined what our batting order would be, but then we put who we envisioned as the second and third string for each of those positions, directly under them. And it was really crude. I had to learn how to do HTML. I had no idea. I have no programming background. Neither does Dave. And it was a WordPress site, and it was bare bones as it could be. We had a logo that I made because I taught myself how to do Photoshop the year before, and it was very average at best. I don't even know if it was average, and we may have used some copyrighted images that we probably couldn't have marketed anyway if we had kept that logo. So it was something we thought that people needed, and we kind of kept doing it. And then Dave had the idea for me to do, since he was kind of doing a little bit more of the depth charts than I was, he said, "Hey, I had this idea. We should start doing starting pitchers, but not just do the week that's coming up, but do the week after that." Mm-hmm. And nobody had been doing that. And I enjoyed it because I could, it gave me a chance to kind of prognosticate what teams were going to do with their rotations more than a week out, and if they were going to skip guys and things like that. And it was fun. And when my kids came around, it became harder and harder to do. I don't have the time management skills that you do. And, I would do it for a few weeks, and then I'd miss a week, or I would go for the first half of the season, and then shit would just get in the way and I wouldn't be able to finish it. So it's something that's kind of fallen by the wayside. And it's really something that I'd like to get back to now that my kids are getting older and they're not as dependent anymore. I'm hoping to do it for the last couple months of the season, but we'll see. If not, I want to get it back for next season because it was a valuable resource, not just for other people looking at the site, but for us as well. Because, that anybody that's played for a while in fab leagues, when you're grabbing 2-star pitchers a week ahead of time, or guys that you think are going to 2-start, you're paying significantly less for them. So it gives you a pretty good advantage if you can pinpoint that.
And some of the best articles out in the industry have come from like, hey, I already do this work for myself.
Yeah.
So like, why not just do a little bit more and make it an article and then share it up? Like I know, like I was for years, I did a daily planner article at Fantasy Alarm, and then I did it last year at Fangraphs. This year, I'm not doing it anywhere, but it really started as like, I already do all this stuff, so why not like turn it into an article and like kill two birds with one stone?
Yep, for sure. It was something Dave was like, hey, I kind of do this. Why don't we do this and put it on the site so we can kind of have it as a resource for ourselves, and it can all be in one place. And it was really beneficial. It was hard to do just because I didn't know HTML very well. And back then, embedding like Google Sheets wasn't even a thing. So you would have to like crudely embed Excel spreadsheets, and it was just awful. So I would just do it HTML, straight HTML, like lists of starters and all. It was extremely hard, and I wasted a lot of time doing extra programming probably that I didn't need to do just to make it not look like garbage. But now that Google Sheets is a thing, embedding those are so simple that when I do get to it, it takes a lot less time. So I want to get back into it so I can make that a valuable resource again, because it was used by quite a few people, and I'm kind of upset at myself for not being able to do it anymore.
Well, how do you like balance like because you said like you're not as good at balancing? Not that I don't think I'm very good at balancing either.
You're a hell of a lot better than I am. I'm really bad at it.
I'm just ignoring my children and my wife. Like I'm not actually balancing things as well as I appear to be. I'm just getting more stuff done on the fantasy side than I am at home. So like, but how does that happen with you? Because like, you guys have kind of had a little bit of a hiatus on the podcast and on the site because life happens, right?
Yeah. My son got ill. We were in the hospital for about a week. And then Dave subsequently got ill as well. So that kind of took us out of it for a while. And I'll be honest, it's me more than it's him. He's got all this stuff ready to go, and I'm the one that runs the show and edits the pods and posts everything. And so he needed me to do that, and I just was being really lackadaisical about things. I wasn't getting stuff done. Even when I was off of school, I just kept finding things to do. It's a problem I have. It's kind of a mental thing. I'm really bad at starting things. When we ended up having to take a break because my kid was sick, and then just getting back into it, I just couldn't do it. I don't know. I just couldn't mentally get over that hurdle of starting things up again. So kind of when you had me on FWFB, that was the first time I'd recorded in 2.5 months, and I appreciate you kickstarting me again. We finally got a show done a few days ago. It was our first one in
nice
3.5 weeks. Yeah, you probably didn't see it because you've been gone.
I literally drove into my hometown or where I live last night, like late last night. So I and I had to like double check. Do I have a podcast? Oh, I do. I'm talking with Jake. So I'm glad. Is it a 3-hour marathon? Because I miss those like long in-depth ones that you guys did.
No, it was only 2.25. We cut this one off.
Still pretty good.
It'll never beat the Johnny L pod that went for 4 hours that we had to chop in half. That was the true marathon. But I'm just bad at time management. I always have been. When I was a kid, I got good grades, but I did my homework and it, took me forever. I just sat there and got distracted by things. And, I probably have some ADHD in me somewhere that's keeping me from staying on task. But, or when I was in college and I didn't have my mom kicking me in the ass to get my homework done, I would put a paper off until 2 a.m. before it was due. And I would just, stay up all night and write it and turn it in and hoped it would be good. So I have some bad habits in terms of work. I get my job done. Obviously, I don't get fired. So that's my family and my job have been my priority, as probably they should be, and just haven't been able to put enough time into the show as I'd like to. I also tend to we tend to over involve our children in activities, so we have way too many things going on for our kids, and I'm kind of hoping that they say, hey, we don't like doing this anymore, so we kind of cut it out. I think we're over anxious parents in that regard. We over involve our kids with stuff, and we just kind of feel guilty when our kids sit at the house, because I feel like we did that when I was a kid in the summer. I didn't have as much going on. I did tennis and I did baseball, and that was it. And when it wasn't going on, we were watching TV or something like that. So, I don't know. I struggle finding a balance there too, because I might be overburdening the kids and we don't even know it.
Yeah, I do that with my kid a little bit too, but I also tell her, like, listen, if you start something, you've got to see it through. Like,
right.
I'm not going to let you, she wanted to take piano lessons once, and I was like, fine, but you've got to actually finish it. And like halfway through, she's like, I don't want to do this anymore. I was like, no. You made me pay for this. You're gonna see it through. I don't care how difficult it is for you and how much whining and complaining I've got to listen to along the way. So like, I get that. But I mean, I have the same type of balance issues, but mine tend, like I said, like, even though someone is joking, I tend to go overboard on the fantasy side of things and forget, hey, like bedtime is at 8 o'clock, not 2 o'clock in the morning when I walk in from my office.
Yeah, at least you get paid for your stuff, though. I mean, it does have some benefit to your family.
That does make it a little bit easier for me to be like, hey, I actually have to go and do this.
Yeah. My wife doesn't see it as a financially beneficial hobby. So,
but it is. I mean, you're making money like in the leagues.
The playing, yes. The podcasting, when you don't see the money roll in initially, it's there's that hurdle you got to get over. And part of it's because I don't put as much time in as I should, but
if you'd like, I could send you a 35-cent check or something like that. Look what I made.
Waste more money on the stamp than the check. Yeah.
That's okay. It'd be worth it for me to get a podcast every week for you guys. So what's next for RotoSaurus and you? Like, do you guys you're getting back going again? So you got an episode, 2 hours and 15 minutes. I'm excited. I'm going to tune in as soon as we're done here and start listening to it before I take my kid to Taekwondo. But like, do you guys just kind of continue with it and then maybe revamp in the off season, or what's kind of next for you and RotoSaurus?
Well, the getting on a regular schedule would be what's next. So one a week is usually our goal. Sometimes things get in the way of that, but that's kind of what we were doing before. So we want to get back to that. Dave has started writing for Rotographs now, so he has that on his plate too, and that's good. I mean, obviously, like I said before, it's good for the brand. It gets him more exposure. Not that he needs a ton more exposure because he has plenty of Twitter exposure.
He does. It's not always the exposure he's looking for. Though I think some might argue it is the exposure he's looking for.
It's getting the followers one way or the other. So, getting on a regular schedule, getting the services we used to provide on the site back up and running. So we'll take that step first, and then maybe we'll see it grow into something more. I think if we ever want to grow the site, we would need to bring more people in on the site aspect, just because I think that has gone by the wayside because we started recording the show. We said for 8 years or so that we should do a podcast, and we finally started doing it about a year ago, and that took away Dave's focus from the site too. So his save stuff, he used to do speculative saves and closer charts and things like that. But since he's moved over to Twitter and the show, it's been harder for him to do that as well. So we just gotta regain our focus. Really, that's what's next for us. We got our merch line, which we wanna get some more exposure so we can sell some more of that stuff, because that's what's going to support the pod at this point. So get the site going, get the show on a regular schedule, and see where it takes us.
Well, Jake, thank you so much for joining me. Remind everybody where you can reach on social media, and then plug everything that you do.
Well, you can find me at The Dust Mite on Twitter. That is my handle. I'm on there a decent amount. And the site is rotosaurus.com, ROTOSAURUS. There's not a ton of content on there right now, but as I said, we're
getting back into it. We want to start that up again, so we'll have the saves information on there for you, as well as the two starters, the two starters coming soon. We'll get that back going again. And you can find us on the High Stakes Heat Pod. It's the RotoSaurus High Stakes Heat Podcast. It's a long name, but just search RotoSaurus and you'll be able to find it.
And before I let you go, the last question I always ask everybody is, if someone's listening and they're going, like, I want to be like Jake, I want to do the podcast, I want to do, a site like RotoSaurus, like, what would be the one piece of advice you would give to them?
Find a supportive spouse and make sure that you don't get discouraged early on, because when we started our site back in 2012, we would get like one comment a month from people, but it is overwhelming to wonder whether or not your site was getting enough traction, and if it was ever going to take off. But really, it sounds cliche, but you put the work in, people are going to find the work. We started out our show and it had maybe 100 downloads for the first episode, but it didn't discourage us. We got our Twitter presence up and it got the word out more, and we're back before the season started, we were pulling a hell of a lot more than 100 per episode. So just keep at it and don't get discouraged if it doesn't take off right away.
I think that is a hugely beneficial piece of advice, because I think often people come into the industry and they go, oh, well, why haven't I done this yet? Or why haven't I gotten this yet? And there's a little bit of frustration that goes along with it. I think for me, I never anticipated that this would turn out to be profitable, much less like a career path for me. And so like it was like, oh, okay, wow, I got 30 people listening to my podcast. That's cool. And I didn't really get discouraged early on. Not to say I haven't gotten discouraged at points while doing this, but I think having reasonable expectations so that way you can exceed them is a good piece of advice.
Yeah, and I remember your origin story about how you kind of forced your way into Tout Wars by showing up and helping out and meeting people, and that's something I struggle with. I'm pretty naturally introverted in person, and we'd go to these high stakes events, and Dave would be glad handing with everybody, and I'd just kind of be sitting back because I guess I have this stupid notion that I think that if people don't notice me for my merits and come talk to me, then then it's not worth it, and that's really dumb. Like, people aren't going to notice you unless you put yourself out there to be noticed. So it's something that I've had to work on a lot. And, we used to make fun of Dave for how he would glad hand with everybody, but really that's the way to market yourself. And it's something that took me a while to learn.
And I mean, it's very true. And it's not something that necessarily comes natural to me either. Though nothing I'd really do in this industry, I think, comes natural to me. I've had to kind of force my way. But I think doing things like showing up to Tout Wars unannounced or uninvited, as it were, and just be like, hey, I'm here, you guys need some help with anything, and then kind of falling into a draft because of that, was huge for me. But also, like, becoming friends with people, has been huge for me. Just getting to know people. Like I said, Dave goes up and talks to people wherever he goes and stuff like that. I think that's huge, and that's been a huge benefit to my kind of growth within the industry for sure.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing it seems like you don't have some sort of relationship to in this industry now. And what? I mean, that only took you, 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, 4 or 5 years. Because, I made myself available and I didn't really say no. Like, when people said, hey, can you do this? Like no joke, when I showed up to Tout Wars that year, I pretty much said, like, I'll like set up tables for you guys. Like, I had no thought that I would end up in a draft. I just wanted people to remember like I was helpful, so that maybe down the line they might invite me in the draft, and it just worked out a lot quicker than I kind of had planned. But I think it's a really good way to make people remember you, is by shaking their hands and going out of your way to be nice and kind of. And I think Dave does a really good job of that, in spite of his kind of antagonist role on Twitter. But you, I think, as well. Like I think you're a little bit quieter than him, obviously, but I've enjoyed all of our interactions, and I think people remember that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It is fun to be part of this community, which is a mostly good community, and everybody looks out for each other for the most part. It is enjoyable to be part of everybody now. It's something, you know, I wanted. I wanted like-minded people to interact with about this stuff. And it was, you know, I kind of had to get over my own hurdles, as I said, of introversion and put myself out there more. And I'm glad that I did. It's been really great getting to know you, and especially the other guys in our, you know, podcast draft circle, and people like Phil Dussault. Just there's so many good minds out there, and fun people to interact with.
Absolutely. I look forward to meeting you one day in person if I can ever make it to Vegas.
Hopefully, yeah. We'll be back there as long as everything's good to go.
I won't be there this year, but maybe next year. Well,
I wish I could go to first pitch. Being a teacher, flying cross country just for a day and a half is hard.
Yeah.
So it's something I hope to do eventually, but it's at a rough time for me.
Yeah, no, understandable. October is the beginning of your school year, so I will be at first pitch if anybody else wants to join me. I was actually just looking at tickets earlier this morning, trying to kind of figure out and book my plans. The weekend of October 17th, I believe, is what it is.
Third weekend in October, yep.
Mm-hmm. And my wife will be going, and her birthday is October 18th, so we'll be celebrating her birthday down there.
I mean, people are more excited to meet her, though, you know.
Absolutely. Like, she's the draw. No one cares about Justin. They all want to hang out with Danielle and make fun of Justin live. Mm-hmm. You can do that live as opposed to
in person. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Jake, thank you so much for joining me.
You got it, buddy. Appreciate you.
Fun times in Cleveland again. Still Cleveland. Come on down to Cleveland town, everyone. Under construction since 1868. See our river that catches on fire. It's so polluted that all our fish have AIDS. We see the sun almost 3 times a year. This guy has at least 2 DUIs. The flats look like a Scooby-Doo ghost town. Don't slow down in East Cleveland or you'll die. Our economy's based on LeBron James. Buy a house for the price of a VCR. Our main export is crippling depression. We're so retarded that we think this is art. It could be worse though, at least we're not Detroit! We're not Detroit!
That will do it for another episode of the Great Fantasy Baseball Invitational Podcast. I want to thank my guest, Jake Halusker from RotoSaurus.com and the High Stakes Heat Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Please give us a rating and review, especially if it's a 5-star variety. It helps us out quite a bit. You can follow me over on Twitter at JustinMasonFWFB. Follow Jake on Twitter at TheDustMite. Read my work over at Fangraphs, Friends of Fantasy Benefits, and TGFBI.com. You can hear me on this podcast, the Friends of Fantasy Benefits Baseball Podcast, and the Sleeper in the Bus Podcast. That will do it for Jake and myself. Thank you for listening. Have a fantastic baseball season.
First place in my league, got a blockbuster on the way, and a pickup up my sleeve. They call my team insane, say I'm the one to beat. So you better bring your A game and start playing, cause every single week another win for me.
Yo, Commissioner, you can just pay me now. City win first place, then take a bow. Finish on top, I'ma set the standard. Don't believe me, you can check the standings. When I draft, I make smart selections. Got more sleepers than a narcoleptic. Meet your match, kid, my lineup's nasty. It's far-fetched thinking you might catch me. No surprise, I'm taking home the prize. Only time I rest is a playoff bye. Make amazing finds off the waiver wire all day and night. Better stay retired. See me in first, all proud and cozy. Bro, please, I can't even count my trophies. Bragging, even when my bats are slumping, I'ma pack a punch, stat tracker junkie.
I'm the one that